Hi guys, I am here to give you the first section of your notes, but I want to start with the calendar. As you can see, we are starting on week 2 right now. I just want to say that this calendar is only meant to guide you through the work that you have. If you want to do more on one day and take a day off, you're more than welcome to. This is just there to pace yourself. So the first week was just a little review. You guys already had Review Guide Unit 1, and then we were going to do the multiple choice, the second unit, multiple choice, and the third unit. Notice that I have you doing the Review Guide Unit 3 multiple choice on day 5 of the second week. You could have done it then. You can do it whenever you want. But today we are going to start with the section 1 of the notes. We're going to go over what we did in class. It seems like forever ago. And then we're going to finish that notes section. Notice here you only have 3 documents that go with this note section. These are the 1920s documents, document 1, 5A, and 4. And there is another video that you can watch on how to do those documents. All right, let's get started. So when we were in class together, we talked about the beginnings of the 1920s. We went over the foreign policy, kind of where we were feeling, and remember the trend here is we hate war. We don't want to do it anymore. After World War I, people in America really just didn't want to be involved because we had experienced such a terrible loss of life and the nation had lost a ton of money because war is expensive. So after World War I, we really returned to that period of isolation. A big reason we do that is because we didn't get involved in the League of Nations. So we're not at the table with the rest of the other countries in the world. And to show how much we didn't like war, that's when we looked at the Washington Naval Disarmament Conference. Remember, we asked everybody to give up all of their weapons to avoid an arms race. That doesn't work. And then we attempt to push forward with the Kellogg-Briand Pact, getting everybody to outlaw war. That also doesn't work. But the purpose of those two is just to show we really don't like war. We want to stay away from it. We never want to have another world war. Now, domestic, remember we said domestic means at home. Climate is like taking the temperature of how people feel. So the domestic climate is we kind of want to return to a time when things were good. Now, if we look at before World War I, when things were quote unquote good in the United States, that's back during the Gilded Age. And what were we doing during the Gilded Age? Well, those are those conservative policies that we're talking about. So we're not being involved in foreign affairs. We didn't have any of those pesky progressive reforms, which meant that our government was hands off when it came to the economy. We also are going to focus on U.S. business production because that's going to make us the money. All that money that we lost and spent on the war, we've got to make it back. And then, because we hate war, we don't want the government to spend any money on it, and we want to limit the debt of the government. What smarter way to do that than to make cuts? You're going to see these kind of demonstrated today when we go over Harding's presidency, but his slogan when he runs is return to normalcy. When were things normal? Well, they were normal way back before the Progressive Era, during the Gilded Age, so let's go back to what we were doing then. We are going to see Republican presidents all throughout the 20s. We are not going to have another Democratic president for a very long time. What do Republican presidents believe in? Well, they believe that the power should not be in the hands of the federal government. It should be in the hands of the state governments. And these Republican presidencies are going to support big business. These ways that they support big business, we have a high protective tariff. Remember, who does a protective tariff protect? American-made goods. We are going to have a less progressive tax policy. Our progressive tax was the graduated income tax, so we want to get rid of that. The graduated income tax, remember that said the more you make, the more you pay. We are going back to a time where it doesn't matter how much you make, everybody pays the same. We want to be less progressive when it comes to taxes. We also are going to try to push for supply side economics. What are we supplying? Money. Why do we want to supply money to the people? Because if people have money, they spend money. That's good for the economy. These Republican presidents are also going to shoot for trickle-down economics. We are going to see this over and over and over again. But trickle-down economics, what it says is that the government will lend money to big businesses and banks. Now, theoretically, the government says if we give money to these big businesses and banks, they will use that money to create jobs, pay people, so the money starts off at the top, and then it would make its way down to the workers, and everybody would have money. More money in the economy means more spending. That means good things, but anybody with a brain can tell that if you hand a bunch of money to big business, there is no guarantee that they're going to create jobs, and that's exactly what they did. They kept the money. It didn't make its way down the bracket, but we tried it. The government during these Republican presidencies is also going to return to a laissez-faire mentality, which just means hands off. We aren't going to go after big business. The government needs to make money, the country needs to make money, and the way we do that is by letting business do whatever they need to do. Which brings us to our first Republican president, Warren G. Harding. He is only going to be president from 1920 to 1923, so he will not serve his full term. He is going to be a Republican senator from Ohio. Just like we were just saying, as a Republican candidate for the presidency, he will support a high tariff. Let's protect big business. Let's make sure that our business here in the United States is the one that people are buying from. He is going to keep on the idea that we should not be involved in foreign affairs, so he opposed the League of Nations. His running mate is going to be Calvin Coolidge, a name that we should file in our brain for a little bit. What's really interesting is we have to look at who he runs against. So Harding is a Republican. The Democrats are going to be James Cox and Franklin Roosevelt. Look at that. Like I said before, Harding's slogan for the presidency is return to normalcy. Let's go back to a time where things were good, things were normal, things were not kind of darkened by world wars or anything like that. And the people really grasp onto that idea, and that really pushes him forward, makes the people like him. Harding is going to conduct what we call a front porch campaign. Now, this is U.S. history. We are not getting fancy with what we're calling this and what it is. He literally gave his speeches from his front porch, and that's the picture that you can see down there at the bottom. Why did he do this? To make himself relatable to the people. He wanted people to see him as just an average guy. You can come and listen to me. Look at my house. This is friendly. We're in the neighborhood. And that really made him popular among the people. If you think back, we can connect this to Andrew Jackson and that Jacksonian democracy relating to the common man. It's the same idea here. You want people to see you as a person, not as this like far away, unconnectable person. You want people to see you as their equal. In this election, though, notice it's 1920, we are going to have women voting in this first election. Remember, 19th Amendment gives women the right to vote. And Harding is going to win the popular vote by 60%. Most of the women are going to vote for him. Think about it. Who was the one that stayed behind during the war? Who was the one who really had that emotional suffering, lost their family, lost their sons, their husbands, their fathers? It's going to be women. So when they go to vote, of course they vote for the guy who says, I'll never let that happen again. Let's go back to the good times. So we have Harding winning. Harding is not the best president because he takes that mentality of let's be hands off. I'm going to let the people do what they need to do. He is going to see in his presidency a lot of corruption, and it begins with the Ohio gang. Remember, Harding is from Ohio. He was a senator in Ohio. That's where we get the Ohio from. So what Harding does when he gets into the presidency is he surrounds himself with friends and other political allies from Ohio. These are going to be people that become members of his cabinet. They are going to abuse their positions of power. They are going to betray that trust that Harding built up when he's giving those front porch campaigns and promising that he's going to turn the country around and everything will go back to normal. What they are going to do is use illegal dealings. These are going to be your bribes, kickbacks. Kickbacks are when you make money off of a deal. So they charge someone a little extra, they skim a little money off of the top, and these are going to lead to political and financial scandals. Now, let's take a look at one of those scandals. The Teapot Dome scandal. This is going to be called Teapot Dome after a mountain in Wyoming that does not look like a teapot at all. I'll show it to you in just a second. But the Teapot Dome scandal, we have Albert Fall, who was the Secretary of the Interior. So he is a part of Harding's cabinet. Secretary of the Interior. Interior is, it's exactly what it is. It's the inside of the United States. They look at the lands and where they go, who gets to have them, that kind of thing, what they get used for. So in 1921, our Secretary of the Interior, Albert Fall, is going to arrange to have oil reserves in Elk Hills, California, and Teapot Dome, Wyoming, to be under the control of the Interior Department, which is his department. Now, the Navy Department is usually the one that's in control of the reserves, and they use those oil reserves in times of emergencies. So it's a little weird that Albert Fall is saying, no, that belongs to the Interior. His reasoning for it, that's on the interior of the United States, that falls under my control. Okay, but the reason that Fall wanted them under the control of the Interior is because he was leasing the land to oil men, people who were going to tap into the oil reserves, in return for a bribe. Fall, he neglects to tell the Navy all of this. And what he's doing at the same time is pulling reserves and what supply the Navy needs away from the Navy. That's a neglect of the Navy. The Navy protects the country. That's not very good. In 1924, which is going to be after Harding's presidency, the Senate is going to investigate Fall and the Secretary of the Interior and these oil reserves, and they are going to find him guilty of taking kickbacks, of taking advantage of his position, and they're going to send him to prison. Now, I want you to take a little listen to this video. It's going to give you a little more information on the Teapot Dome scandal.
Now back to the Teapot Dome scandal, which ultimately shows us that you need to be very careful with who you're hanging out with. The whole thing centers around one of our least liked presidents in history, Warren G. Harding. Now his administration might possibly be the most corrupt, which is really impressive when you consider that he died 2 years into it. The Harding administration does more shady deals by 9 a.m. than most people do all day. So the scandal involved oil reserves in California and in Teapot Dome, Wyoming. Named that way because of its rock formation that looks like a teapot, I guess. make a pretty crappy cup of tea. Anyway, these lands were set aside to be naval oil reserves. Enter Albert Hall, Harding's Secretary of the Interior, who in 1922 convinced the Secretary of the Navy to transfer control of the lands to him, citing, "Dude, they're in the interior." Hall promptly leased out oil production rights to the Mammoth Oil Company, not Big Oil, Mammoth Oil, and Pan American. This was all done without competitive bidding that was, while not illegal, pretty much a jerk move. Now, this angered a bunch of people in the Senate, and an investigation into the deal ensued. At first, the Senate found nothing, probably because all the key documents kept on, disappearing. But then they found evidence of a $100,000 loan that went to Hall from Pan American's Edward Doheny. This broke the investigation wide open, and it was later revealed that Hall received over $400,000 in bribes from the two companies, the equivalent of over $5 million today. Hall was found guilty of accepting bribes from Doheny and became the first cabinet member ever to go to prison. Doheny was acquitted of giving bribes, and his company, oddly enough, foreclosed on Hall's farm, citing failure to pay back that $100,000 loan. Now, a major outcome of this was the establishment of Congress's ability to compel testimony. And while the scandal did hurt Harding, it didn't kill him, mainly because it was years after he had already died. But it was just another scandal and possibly the most corrupt administration we had ever seen. Now, probably my favorite scandal in all of this is when the Attorney General's office was involved in selling pharmacy liquor rights to bootleggers. Mind you, this is all during Prohibition. So what do you think?
So that just gives you an idea of what we're talking about with the Teapot Dome scandal, and showing that these people that that Harding put into his administration and into his cabinet, just like Fall, it shows how corrupt they really were. Not so much Harding, although Harding had his own issues with, there have been letters released that he wrote to his neighbor's wife, and that he has a secret love child, so he's got his own issues. But it really shows that this hands-off approach that he's taking, these people that he was trusting that weren't really qualified, but we still put them in the cabinet anyway, what lengths they went to take advantage of the government. So, as you just heard in that video, Harding does not live for his entire presidency. Harding is going to go across the country promoting some of his policies in 1923. While he's out on that cross-country tour, Harding is going to become ill, and he dies of a heart attack. The Teapot Dome scandal doesn't become public until after he dies, and that really changed the public's perception of this president that they loved so much when he was in office. Now, Harding's presidency is going to be scarred by this. It's usually what we remember it for, rather than what he was doing. After Harding's death, we see his vice president, Calvin Coolidge, becoming president, which we will return to next time. But I want to wrap up with one more quick summary video on Warren G. Harding. This is going to be 60 seconds on your president. Take a listen.
The Progressive Era brought big changes to the United States, and World War I brought big changes to the world. Change makes you tired. So in 1920, Americans elected a guy who promised to relax, Republican Senator Warren G. Harding of Ohio. Harding, a former newspaper publisher from a mid-sized town, knew how to give a crowd-pleasing speech and knew how to get along with the press. He promised a return to normalcy and a more hands-off government. He won in a landslide, thanks in part to millions of new women voters empowered by the 19th Amendment. Harding supported pro-business policies and eased off on federal regulation. A new budgeting law made him the first president to propose spending levels for the executive branch, and he helped cut government costs. But Harding, who was prone to nervous breakdowns, was overwhelmed by the job. He wasn't an independent thinker or a good manager. For most of his political career, he followed the lead of Republican Party bosses. Some appointees took advantage of Harding's weakness and stole from the government. The most notorious example of this was the Teapot Dome bribery scandal. Those crooks ruined Harding's reputation, but Harding wasn't around to see it. On a trip to the West Coast in 1923, he got sick and died suddenly.
All right, and that is the presidency of Harding. Now, next time we come together, we're going to be doing the notes section 2. So take a look out for that video.